Hi, everybody. It's FoxxC here again with another episode of West Coast Hustle, the interview show where I talk to activists, artists, and community builders on the West Coast of North America about their work and kind of what they are doing and let them showcase a little bit of their projects. And today I'm with Ted Smith of the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club, which is, I think, the second oldest cannabis club in the world still. Yeah.
So yeah,
That's super cool. And you've been doing this since 1995. Um,
yeah, it's been 25 years now.
yeah, which is really cool. And I worked with you about a decade ago. Oh my goodness, um, at the Buyers Club, which was at the time the Cannabis Buyers Club of Canada, and worked with you on the Hempology 101 textbook. That was kind of a side project that you were doing with the or at the University of Victoria with the clubs there and doing kind of promoting the legalization of cannabis through education. And we've had legalization happen here. So that's changed a lot of things. And I understand that hempology is kind of wrapped up, or at least a major part of that as a major project has wrapped up. Yeah. So where are you at now? I've kind of been following a little bit, but this is a good way to get in. What's your hustle? What is keeping you afloat now? I think you're back at the club.
Yeah, I'm pretty much just focused at the club now.
Hmm.
I'm not really working in the broader community. I wasn't doing much before COVID,
Hmm.
except just being focused on helping the club survive. And so yeah, that really was the reason I got back into cannabis activism. I left after my partner Gail died,
Hmm.
and the club seemed to be failing without my leadership. So I went back after legalization had already been started, and
Hmm.
really that for the longest time in my life, just kind of ending prohibition was a huge goal, and so if it weren't for the club being so uh, I guess almost dysfunctional without me, I probably wouldn't have come back. But
Yeah.
it's been a good place to focus.
Yeah. And so I guess that answers the side hustle question. I know you've had a couple things that you tried started you had worked on Gale's Tea and a couple of those projects, and that's all just kind of been pushed into the club now.
Yeah, the demand for Gale's tea really never grew,
Mm-hmm.
and I still have a lot of herbs and things that I could be putting together, but I've just been so focused on the club
Mm-hmm.
and stressed and drained with energy doing that I really haven't been able to work on the tea party or the tea company or much else.
Yeah, and I mean, having worked there, I know how much of an emotional and um, sometimes physical drain it is to be spending so much time focused on member care and like the stress of dealing with regulation and law enforcement. I guess regulation now, but law enforcement and um, how has that changed since legalization happened? And then like now that we have COVID, how has that affected things?
Okay, well, last November we were raided by the British Columbia Community Safety Unit. They're called the CSU, and so we were expecting that. We've published a strategic plan that's available on the Cannabis Digest website, an
Hmm.
old newspaper I used to publish that we still do online.
Hmm.
And in the strategic plan, we actually said that we would almost need to get rated in order to expose the flaws within legalization,
Mm.
and that we really just had a vague plan at the time, but we thought that once we got rated, then we would be able to push to be able to make the changes necessary for us to become legal without compromising the quality of the products and services we're offering our members now.
Hmm.
And so so far so good. Not only did we get raided last November, but after that we went to the Victoria City Council
Hmm.
and got their unanimous support to get an exemption
Hmm.
from the law.
Excellent.
And then we actually got raided again in the summer in July, which was a surprise. We got hit pretty hard with a lot of product in the store.
Hmm.
But that seemed to spur on a second wave of pressure to the province.
Hmm.
And a few months later, after that raid, we actually got a letter of support for an exemption, or at least partial support from the province itself.
Okay.
And so that put a lot of extra wind in our sails, I guess.
Hmm.
And we're working towards an exemption where we've actually got it all into the lawyers pretty much. They're just kind of finalizing it to send off in January here.
Okay.
Um, but it's kind of making it up as we go along because there's no exemption application to that we can apply for.
Right.
Um, and in fact, we expect Health Canada to turn the exemption down.
Hmm.
We it would be very rare of them to admit that they've screwed up so badly that we should be allowed to continue.
Hmm.
That being said, the plan has been to take them to court after they say no.
Hmm.
And so we have a decent law firm
Hmm.
lined up, JFK Law Corporation, and we expect we'll be filing for a judicial review once that application's turned down. So we've got a couple years of fighting ahead, one way or another.
Yeah. And that's kind of been like the story of the Buyers Club for most of its existence, one way or another, is pushing the boundaries of the law and getting busted or raided or whatever, and having to take it to a judicial review or take it to the Supreme Court and argue your case and force the government into a position where they have to change the laws in a way that accommodates you more, which has been a fairly effective method, at least of getting us to the point where legalization was in the public consciousness as a realistic political goal. And then can we talk a little bit about the difference between legalization, especially like we have in Canada, and the idea of decriminalization and how that's played out here and what impact that's kind of had on the industry, I guess more in BC, but also nationwide?
Okay, well, in hindsight, it would have been really nice to have a phase of real decriminalization rather than really going from prohibition to legalization so quickly. Although there was sort of a de facto decriminalization in terms of the police,
Hmm.
really not arresting people not only for possession of it, but even with the proliferation of dispensaries we saw a few years ago,
Right.
that was essentially, a form of decriminalization in that
Hmm.
there was no enforcement, but it wasn't legal either.
Hmm.
um, I think most of us will look back at those as the golden days because
Yeah.
legalization has truly ruined what was a once beautiful industry here in British Columbia.
Hmm.
And so legalization, unfortunately, in Canada has meant hyper regulation on the production end of things
Yeah.
and the retail end.
Hmm.
And so it's been literally a corporate takeover of our industry in that the regulations for production, for growing, and for processing um, are just so restrictive that it plays into the favor of large corporations
Right.
and
So it's like it.
squeezes out all the people that did the industry.
Yeah, and so it's like millions of, I think it's like a minimum $1 million investment or something to get into the industry as a grower, with all those security requirements and the like the Health Canada's requirements on um product quality and growing conditions and all that. Um
For a grower, yeah, I think it's more like 1.5 million to two, almost like, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've seen a little bit in BC that the black market has kind of stuck around somewhat. It's shifted, but like the government we've gone all government here, and that's kind of been not a huge success from their perspective.
Yeah, certainly the black market's still alive and well here. Although there's a bit of a glut on the market, it seems like everybody's growing too much pot these days. So
Yeah, I've noticed that.
that that works a bit in the consumer's favor.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's going to be a lot of companies going bankrupt here
Mm-hmm.
as a result, because they just simply can't. Well, they've just set themselves up to fail with everything that they've done, and the scale that they're trying to grow at is just not going to produce the quality of medicine that
Mm-hmm.
consumers have been used to getting with
Mm-hmm.
the small scale craft growers that have had to be highly competitive with the quality of their product.
Mm-hmm.
And they've just kind of gone into the mass production end of things in a way that's really not very functional.
Yeah, and it's
Um,
definitely driven prices down. Like you can find $100 ounces in dispensaries in this city now, at a fairly regular basis. They're not
like the
great
legal
quality.
ones.
No, not the legal ones. The
Yeah.
illegal ones.
Okay.
The legal ones. Well, like you go into. Ha, have you been into a legal dispensary?
Over a year ago, I went into one.
Yeah, I got stuck downtown one time in Vancouver, and I didn't have. I was like going from one job to another job, and I didn't have time to go anywhere else. And I went to the legal dispensary, and I was just like, "You want me to pay $30 for that?" And oh, you can keep the box. No, you can't keep the box. It's just like, um, uh, so
Yeah.
yeah, that didn't last very long. I think I think they've had more success in cornering the market in places where the black market wasn't as well established, like the craft cannabis market wasn't as well established. Like Ontario and Alberta immediately spring to mind. Ontario's big mess with like Vic Taves and the whole like the former police force getting involved with legal medicinal cannabis, and that whole big mess was just like, I've seen the light on weed after busting growers for 20 years. Trust me. It's just like, dude. Ugh. Yeah. Um and I think you kind of touched on this, the way that corporate cannabis has kind of moved into both the growing and now the distribution. Like again in BC, it's the provincial government and what the BC government employees union that really pushed to get the control over the distribution in British Columbia. Is that right?
Well, it's been interesting from the outside to try and figure out who's doing what, because there's all
Mm,
sorts of factions in government here.
right.
And so it seems like, the revenue side of the bureaucracy in the BC government saw this as an opportunity that they could set up their own short stores, that they could basically, make money as a middleman, because they got their big
Mm-hmm.
warehouse in Richmond that everybody's got to buy it off of.
Mm-hmm.
And then they thought that they could also run the retail end and just basically, yeah, run the street dealers off the street
Yeah.
as in the big government. And so the first store in BC that was legally opened was a government retail store.
Right.
Uh,
And that was in
they,
Kamloops.
yeah,
Yeah.
they put very little to no effort into helping transition the dispensaries that were already operating, that would have bent over backwards to comply with the new regulations if they'd been allowed to.
Mm-hmm.
I know of dispensary owners in Victoria that have now been strung along for over 2 years for no good reason,
Mm-hmm.
because the government just is more interested in putting in their stores, or because I guess there's going to be one in the big Eaton Center in downtown Victoria. Um, and so they've eyed up these
Mm-hmm.
prime locations for their stores, which is completely unfair for regular business people.
Right.
And they're like, just in terms of the way that the business works.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been hard to imagine that, people who've been, punished by the government for years are just going to turn around and buy it off them because it's legal there when they
Yeah.
can get better herb at cheaper prices off their neighbors. So,
Yeah. Like it's always they've done for 30 years.
yeah,
And I think that they're hopefully they'll figure that out. And I remember when legal a couple years ago when we got legalization and they were going through kind of each province was given their own head to how they were going to manage it. And the BCGU, the Government Employees Union, pushed very, very, very hard. I remember seeing ads on Facebook and stuff from them saying they're the ones who should be responsible to handle the new legal market for cannabis. And I'm
right,
looking at them and being like, do any of some of you probably smoke weed, but like there is this whole industry of people who have, years of experience, and you're also going to say if any of them have a criminal record, they can't work in the business? Are you kidding?
right,
Like, what?
yeah,
um I'm, fortunately don't have a criminal record, but it's hard to go and be like, yeah, I'm going to go work for that and use all that expertise to help you. I don't think so. So that's kind of been my position on struggling to get back into cannabis a as a business, as a career, is just that it's hard to find a niche that's anything close to where my values sit now. Which brings me to the next question, because I'm good at this. So, can you describe some of the challenges involved in running a community focused organization within a capitalist framework, especially given this experience of moving from kind of like this outside the law to now a legalization framework that's dominated by capital?
oh boy, well, there's a lot of challenges. We're a nonprofit society,
Hmm.
so we can't borrow money. We can't even get a bank account right now,
Hmm.
which is one of the troubles for anybody trying to get into the legal industry. That's a small scale
Hmm.
business. Is it's virtually impossible to even open up a bank account right now, because as soon as you admit that you're doing anything with cannabis, the banks just freak out and
Hmm.
won't even open anything. So you kind of got to be a big company somehow to
Hmm.
do that, or pull some other games. I don't even know how they all do it, but
Have a shell or
Fox,
something.
yeah.
Yeah. Holding
But
company.
being a nonprofit society um, works against us on so many levels, trying to work in the in the business world.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, just the way that the corporate business world works, even internally, is a struggle, because we've been set up in this like hyper competitive world,
Hmm.
and we constantly have issues within our own employees. Like when we're talking about the drain of this work, actually,
Hmm.
the employees have been more trouble than any authority figure over the years. Just
Yeah.
some of the infighting, and it's weird because like I try to treat people as equally and fairly as possible, and our club actually has a kind of a straight pay scale, with one
Hmm.
exception. Now we actually pay a little bit more money to the manager,
Hmm.
and it used to be that everybody was paid the same,
Same.
and
Yeah.
things were or the work was distributed on according to what people could do and
Hmm.
such. um, but as soon as one person got paid $2 more than everybody else, the
Hmm.
amount of resentment in the organization towards that person,
Hmm.
and the amount of times that I've heard, well, why would I do anything extra if I'm not going to get paid for it?
Yeah.
As if like getting paid and having a good job doing good work wasn't enough in the first place.
Yeah.
Um, because that's the way the rest of the world works. That like you work harder than your coworkers, you get rewarded.
Right.
It is, and so yeah, it's frustrating to not only have to you know uh, uh, be thrown into this competitive world where we're really small fish, but then even internally we're constantly competing.
Hmm.
And because there's so much money at the end of the rope for some people, it seems.
Hmm.
We've got businesses just frothing at the mouth to have us shut down so they can take over the sales that we've had.
Yeah.
We had one get a license across the street almost immediately, and now they're setting up shop in a bigger store that's going to be just down the street. They're moving their zoning, and right in the middle of 3 or 4 that it seems well, certainly the one across the street was hoping we would have been shut down a long time ago.
Right. Yeah. And have you managed to maintain the prices at the club? I know they went up a little bit, but especially on like the edibles and topical products.
The edibles and topicals have gone on up a little bit from what they were. In large part, actually, the cost of goods have gone up quite a bit. But today, actually, we just lowered our bud prices, partly because the club's doing so well, and partly because it is a very competitive scene out there, and our sales have dropped a little bit, I think, because of that. But mostly because we can afford it, and we're a nonprofit society, and if we're doing well, it should go back into our members. And we were making for the longest time disproportionately more off our pot sales. I would joke that we would sell our cookies at cost because it kept people alive for longer, so they'd buy more pot.
Yeah, I remember that. That was when we had those cookies for $1, right?
A buck a cookie,
Yeah, buck a cookie.
And now even like there's still $2.50 a cookie.
Yeah,
and
which is an incredible deal. It's the same recipe and everything, right?
It's the same recipes, and it's not much more than just a regular cookie costs in the world, but I think we figured it out, and it's something like 65 milligrams of THC. So that's like 4 or 5 times what's allowed in a government serving. That typically would cost you $4 or $5 no matter what it was in.
Minimum.
At least. Minimum. Right? So really, when you compare the price of our edibles to government sanctioned, it's a fraction of the price. But our herb is certainly a lot closer in that way.
Yeah, and you can find all the recipes for the club's topicals and edibles and stuff on your website still, right? Or the
not all of them. Like, we've actually got some new products. We haven't got that far yet. And our cookbook has some old products that we don't sell anymore.
Okay.
But the recipes there. We're actually working now on putting up a new cookbook that's got all of the new stuff and everything accurate with more information than ever. But or you can just search the Cannabis Buyers Club of Canada cookbook.
Okay, cool. And I'll put links down below in the video bit. Cool. And I guess, like, at this point, what results would you like to see from your work with the club? And where would you like this to go in the short term?
In the short term, what we're hoping to get is a temporary exemption that would help us and all of our suppliers work with the government towards getting the whole deal licensed, including our growers, or as many as possible, and some of our extract suppliers as well. So if we're able to get that temporary exemption, either through the courts or from the government itself, then we'll spend a couple of years working towards full compliance and advocating for changes in law that would allow us to continue to operate, because a lot of what we're doing is not allowed to happen by law, including, like, our smoking room isn't allowed, and the amount of THC in some of our products, and there's really a list of different rules that we'd need to change, but a lot of them are in the works anyway. So we just need some time. And so at the end of that exemption period, we would switch over. And at that point, we would be both our kitchen. See, part of the dilemma is the kitchen as well is a lot more complicated than the actual store.
Right.
Got to get all these products, fully legal, and go through all these Health Canada rules and stuff like that with them. So so we would put our kitchen and our retail store would switch over to the legal system kind of at once, is the plan.
Okay.
And then we would be having to source everything from the legal market. Hopefully at that time the price and quality would be comparable to what we have now, so that
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't be a step backwards for our patients. That's kind of what we're holding out for.
Right.
So yeah, so at that point we would switch over to a fully legal operation. Um, we think that the goal will be to stay medical.
Mm-hmm.
We may not have a choice and have to go recreational, which in a way wouldn't be a bad thing. It would mean more sales,
Mm-hmm.
and we could give things at a cheaper price to our members.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be interesting, because one of the rules that we're working around or have to fight is that Health Canada does not allow for a medical marijuana store. So basically,
Right.
like, you're allowed recreational stores, but if you want to buy medical marijuana, you got to do it online,
Right.
right? You can't actually walk into a store and talk to somebody.
Right. Which is
And so, yeah.
frustrating, because that was what the biggest part, I think, of the club was, especially for membership who has um complex disabilities or diseases that they need assistance with, or like wants to doesn't have a lot of the social relationships that they would otherwise have, and like is using the club as not only to get advice on their medicine, but also to like share information about how to medicate with other members. And like there's a lot of overlap between members and the things that they struggle with, and a lot of people I remember were dealing with how to deal with social services, and people would pop in and be like, there's a delivery of something that's for free right now, and like it's a kind of a community hub for a lot of people on the margins as well. And I think pushing that online has really not been the best.
Um, for a lot of people, it's just completely unreasonable, especially, like, we got a lot of patients there that are elderly. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's the whole goal here, is to help people that are sick and dying, which happens as you get older, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got like a lot of elderly people who aren't computer savvy,
Mm-hmm.
who don't know how to use a credit card online, and uh, want to talk to somebody in person,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what they've done their entire life.
Yeah.
And so it's really awkward for one of them, I mean, like an elderly, old lady or something, to get
Mm-hmm.
online and purchase something that she knows so little about.
Right.
And so yeah, it's one of the rules that when we tell people that like, if you walk into a recreational store and you ask a person working there, an employee, whether that product will help you get a good sleep, that employee can't even legally tell you that.
Oof.
They can't say anything about the medicinal benefits of their products, because
All
nothing's
they
been
can do is
tested and proved.
right, and all they can do is point to like the description from the grower or whatever, right?
Yeah.
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 So that's just dysfunctional and
Mm-hmm.
absurd. So it may be that certainly our temporary license would be for medical only,
Mm-hmm.
and then our full license in the end may be that as well. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
But in the long run, what we really hope to be able to put together is integrative palliative care centers, where we have grow facilities out in the, kind of in the country,
Mm-hmm.
that are hooked up to palliative care centers, so that we can have medicine being grown. There's some strains of cannabis that are specific to help fight certain strain or certain types of cancers.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll grow those types of medicines right on the facility. We'll be juicing cannabis and making like fresh cannabis products, like
Mm-hmm.
right there on site, and integrated into another, a bunch of other kind of health services.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so we want to kind of create these palliative care centers across the country, actually, as a long-term goal. So, we've got a few stages to go through to get there, but
Right.
hopefully that.
That's taking the club kind of to its next step. And and like for kind of reference, this is 25 years ago when you started this. This was a time when like the only way that you could even everything was super illegal. You were basically buying your weed off of street dealers, or like, if you were lucky enough to know the guy who knew the grower or whatever. Um, and the most of the early stuff was based around getting medical access for people who had um, terminal illnesses like cancer. Um, and it's kind of come a long way from then, but the roots of the club itself were in helping the people who were most vulnerable, people with cancer and HIV, and helping. I know that there's a lot of people who have been members of the club that have passed on, and I think that's, more so than other organizations or like even other dispensaries in the business that we've seen spring up in the last like 5 or 6 years, that kind of sets what you're doing apart a little bit. There's a very much a component of like, the reproductive aspect of society that you've kind of incorporated in to the organization there that most don't really pay attention to. So I'm going to use that to go to the next question, which is what's kind of your approach to activism and community building? Not necessarily for just the cannabis industry, but in terms of I know you did something with like the Youth Inner Work Society or something when you were first called early 2000s. That was well before I met you, but you used to talk about it all the time.
Yeah. Well, certainly I've done a range of different things. I haven't just done cannabis work, although that's dominated my career, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember a while ago, many years ago, um, thinking about it in terms of how many new members we got into the club in a year,
Mm-hmm.
and how many people grew up or lived in the town that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a small farm town of
Yeah.
about 250 people. And at one point, I realized that our club was signing up about 500 people a year,
Mm-hmm.
which was two of my small villages full of patients that were coming into my family.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I realized that in a way, the best thing for me to do and the best way for me to behave was to still almost pretend that I'm in that village that I grew up in,
Mm-hmm.
and that I'm related to everyone around me,
Mm-hmm.
and that we're all helping each other out, because that's
Mm-hmm.
in the village I'm from. That's a lot how it still works. Even it's kind of magical. There's a
Right.
lot of good people there, and if somebody's got a project they're building on their house, well, like, everybody comes over, and the men are working fixing it up, and the women are feeding everybody, and
Mm-hmm.
the kids are taking care of themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a very communal type atmosphere, even though it's not like a commune in any sense. It's just a
Yeah.
little farm village.
Yeah.
um
That's Hespeler, Ontario, right?
no, Hesper's city. It's
The
part of
city nearby.
Cambridge. It's Moncton is the name of it. It's
Okay.
you can see it on my, but not Moncton, New Brunswick with the C. It's with the K.
Moncton,
um
Ontario. Okay, with a K.
yeah,
Okay.
I'm proud to say that I got Moncton on the Facebook map, because it wasn't even on Facebook till I got a friend that I knew that worked for the company to put it on there. So
Nice. Oh, okay. Cool. And so you've tried to bring that into the organization of the club, and I think, you talked a little bit about infighting, and every now and then you get people in the broader community who kind of disagree with either how you run things or have conflicts. And I mean, that's been going on for years, and I think will continue to go on for years with any organization that exists almost ever. Um, um, but what do you see as like some concrete steps that people can take to build sustainable community-based organizations, or anti-capitalist organizations?
hmm. um Well, I think one of the things that really got me through this, because I started my work, I lived in a van
Mm-hmm.
and had very little resources. I didn't grow up here, so I didn't know anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but this little saying, do what you can with what you got,
Yeah.
has stuck with me at times. And it's really easy to think about and dwell on all the things you don't have
Mm-hmm.
and how to get to them, and it's important to do that. But I think far too often we don't really appreciate the people and the things that we do have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by keeping one's expectations just stupid low while trying for gold, right?
Yeah.
Um, is really important, because we all need to strive for the best
Mm-hmm.
in what we're doing. Um, but the world is a complex, dangerous place for a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if things are tried to be pushed too far too fast because your expectations are too great,
Mm-hmm.
um, then it might not work,
Mm-hmm.
and you could end up not only spinning your wheels, but losing any momentum you may gain from other people.
Mm-hmm. And hurting the people around you and the community that you depend on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I remember, like, when I started the club, actually I really wasn't trying to sell any medicine as much as just get the word out there it was available and that it was important to be available.
Mm-hmm.
um I ended up even collecting welfare for a couple of years while I did a bunch of volunteer work,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that helped me incubate the club, because I didn't have to depend on making money off of sick people for the first few years while the club was going.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I kept my expectations just really low about how much money I could be making.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess that's the other goal too, or the other thing. Like, in my work, I've never sought to make money. That's
Right.
never been the goal of my work. I've had to use money. It's been, obviously a big part of my work has been money management,
Mm-hmm.
but that has never been the goal. The goal has always been to make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started out with that dream and an idea of how to do that. And because I've had that focus that hasn't been a monetary focus, I've gotten tons and tons of support.
Mm-hmm.
If my goal had been to make money and to be self-indulgent,
Mm-hmm.
then I wouldn't be getting that kind of support.
Mm-hmm.
And so for people that are wanting to go and make the world a better place, it's important to understand that you're on, in a microscope to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that, if it's seen that, you're kind of in it for yourself, or you're trying to profit, well, you're not going to get that support in the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to appreciate what you have, and nurture the kind of the grassroots, as it were, rather than trying to build something too fast
Mm-hmm.
and to build it around monetary value.
Mm-hmm. And like a big thing that kind of comes up more in the online sphere is about like attention as value, and how we how to put this, how we've kind of like the idea that there is kind of like we're all mired in capitalism, so any attempts to like build outside of that without tearing down the whole system are just never going to work, because they're just ultimately going to get co-opted back in to like the broader structure, where you have to make so many compromises that it might as well not be worth it. And I don't really love that position, although like I know you and I kind of used to spar on the fact that I'm a little bit more radical than you are in terms of not wanting to deal with government and regulation. Um, but like, how does that play in? I know that we kind of come from a different generation of activists and perspectives, and I'm even seeing that coming again with a new generation. And um, yeah, what I'm trying to ask is like, what's your perspective on that? Like, we're in, the overarching system is capitalism, but you're operating, a members focused not for profit within that structure. Um, that has different goals, and like, how do you keep, and I think, how have you managed to keep that separate and not get sucked in, I think, is where I'm going with this. And I think, is it not just because a lot of people are like, well, personal responsibility isn't enough, is kind of like the liberal answer to things, and you can't, solve structural problems with personal responsibility. So is this like a structural thing? Is it a combination?
Well,
Complex question. I can always clip this part out.
well, it's yeah, it's hard to know exactly um how to describe my approach in that sense. Um, I it is the way that I work and the club works dramatically different than the rest of the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
um, and that's something that I designed almost from the beginning, that I like with the equal wages and other things, like it was really important for me that the wealth of the club be distributed as widely and equally as possible,
Hmm.
and that in doing so it would gain strength, right? That
Right.
by if I or someone or something siphoned money off, then there's not that widespread support to make the club stronger.
Hmm.
And so in trying to ensure, and that was why 8 years ago I made it a nonprofit society, was
Hmm.
to ensure that that the profits of the club uh, go either back into benefiting the members or others that are supporting it.
Hmm.
um I yeah so it's different than the way the rest of the world works, because typically people that set up any type of business are hoping to profit and gain from that and
Hmm.
retire off it and everything.
Hmm.
Whereas I've always thought that the more successful I am in creating this enterprise, the less I'll have to worry about taking care of myself when I'm older, because
Right.
so many people will be supportive of me, because they're able to make a good living and feel good about themselves through
Hmm.
what they do.
Right.
um so yeah, it's quite different than the way other places in our industry are structured as well.
Hmm.
It's not like others have copied this work, what I do. It's interesting, because yeah, most of the dispensaries that got in just saw the money and
Hmm.
haven't invested in the community, whereas to me it's been all about the community.
Hmm.
And having a vibrant social life, having a smoking lounge for people there, it's just something that's just like, it's just cost us money to have a smoking lounge and staff
Hmm.
time and
Hmm.
everything, right? So like,
Hmm.
most businesses, the idea of putting a smoking lounge in there just would be a complete nightmare for them.
Right.
um Whereas for us, it's like that's been critical, and COVID's actually had it shut down, and it's been horrible for us,
Hmm.
because we don't, yeah, it's our club isn't the same at all without that lounge there, that life
Hmm.
energy that comes to the place every day.
Hmm.
And so yeah, we are are a lot different in how we function. And I think that's partly why we're so loved. Well, I
Hmm.
know that's why we're so loved.
Yeah, definitely. And those are all the things, I mean, not all the things, but a lot of the things that are my fondest memories of spending time at the Buyers Club is, hanging out with people. I guess it was the box at the time, but now you have the turn the old distribution room into the lounge.
We still call it the
Um,
box.
it's still the box. Okay. I've been in there once when I got back from Japan and I came over and visited. I got to smoke in there one time. Um, well, it's been 5 years, I think, 5 or 6 years since I've been over. So I'll have to change that when the virus is gone. Um, Something that
Yeah.
came up with this that I'm really interested in talking about, it's kind of been a focus of the essays and the other work that I've been doing, is like the idea of building this community and like having, you're talking about having the life and like the social life and all these, paying for extra labor to have people on hand, to have the smoking room, um, and how that plays into this idea of reproductive labor. And I've been reading a lot of feminist Marxism lately. Um, the idea of like the reproduction of class societies and how that is supported by all of this, you know, what we call, what the feminists call reproductive labor, but is stuff like, you know, emotional care, and medical care, and you know, those social support networks that allow um, people to be productive. And I think in a lot of ways that is like a, you know, maybe not from that perspective, but that's kind of the result of what the club has become, is an organization that's kind of based on similar principles. And so how do you see taking that kind of kernel and, you know, moving it forward so that another generation can take that and grow with it?
Oh, geez.
Ha.
Um, well, if we're able to survive, our goal is to have, these types of dispensaries and facilities, like I say, attached to
Hmm.
palliative care centers, and so that we would have, smoking lounges and dispensaries and things, kind of all together. And yeah, it wouldn't be a franchise per se, because we're a
Hmm.
nonprofit society, but our goal would be to create, more, or inspire others to attempt similar projects.
Hmm.
But
Do you still have
yeah, at
the
this point, we're just worried about surviving so that the future generations can see us.
have an example?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, do you, I guess it's probably changed a lot, but do you still, do you have the operations manual public, or did you not ever do that?
Yeah, we've posted it on the Cannabis Digest.
Okay, cool.
There's been some changes to it, but
Yeah, I imagine.
just within the last year, I believe we put the whole thing up there. It's quite the document, actually.
Yeah, I bet. I remember working on it a little bit, and then now it's kind of, I mean, changed a ton, because that was still before it was a not-for-profit. While we were still not even a business, legally speaking. Ah.
Yeah.
Ted's bookstore. Um, and yeah, so that'll be really cool to look at. I'll put links to that below. Um, and do you have any advice or recommendations for people who feel called to doing activist work? I know it's not the easiest path to choose in terms of what you do with your time, but yeah.
Well, for myself, uh, having lived, pretty much my entire adult life out of university, helping others and making the world a better place. I can't imagine what my life would be like if I had focused instead on, being self-indulgent and accumulating material wealth.
Hmm.
Having spent 25 years of this work, um, I, am so rewarded in my efforts, and so appreciated for them by others, that the value and worth that I have could never be calculated financially.
Hmm.
Um, if you judge yourself in the world in economic terms,
Hmm.
um, then you're up for a pretty tough run.
Hmm.
You'll never have more than everybody else. You'll always be struggling to have more, and judging yourself for not. And
Hmm.
um, but if you've focused your life on helping others, and again, kind of making the world a better place, um, then I just see nothing but rewards coming from that.
Hmm.
and as long as you can manage a roof over your head and decent food, then I think a project is worth doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's hard because there's a lot of things that would make the world a better place that aren't financially viable.
Mm-hmm.
And in those cases, people need to try and figure out ways that they can sustain themselves so that they can still do it if they find that worth,
Mm-hmm.
and if others do as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been lucky, I found a cause that many people found value in.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're smart to choose the right cause at the right time and 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 go at it with for the right reasons, I think most people would be successful.
Mm-hmm. Just redefining success.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. My last kind of question for everybody, which is kind of fun, is obviously outside of cannabis, what is your drug? Like the thing that you turn to relax, get away from things, substance, exercise, meditation, or whatever. I think I know the answer to this, but
Yeah. Well, certainly psychedelics have played a big part of my life.
Mhm,
And not alcohol. I've quit drinking almost 25 years ago now. But certainly LSD and mushrooms have been there for me at times. I
mhm,
need to kind of chill out and relax, and LSD a little bit more than mushrooms, but there's still good medicines. And I have a teepee set up in my backyard in the summer normally, and it's nice
mhm,
to have a fire and trip out in there with some friends. So
mhm.
that's my thing.
Yeah, nice. And I don't think I've actually done acid with you, but I've definitely gone to Halloween before when um, uh, there's been some tripping going on. Um, so yeah, cool. Well, thank you for joining me. This was really great. It was nice to catch up and kind of yeah, it's been a little while since we've talked. So
Yeah.
um, see how you've been doing and where things are going, and it's refreshing to hear your perspective again. It's been a while, and I'm really glad that we got to do this. So that has been West Coast Hustle. Thank you for joining us. This has been Ted Smith of the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club. I'm going to put down below this video links to the Buyers Club and some of the stuff we talked about in this video, and also stuff for my social media. You can find me on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Otherwise, if you would like to support my show and what I am doing to bring content to you, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com/foxxtales, or you can consider a one-time donation at coffee.com/foxxtales, and I will catch you all later. Bye.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
No worries.